My name is Ann Shea, and I have the honor of serving as president of the Illinois chapter of the Patrons of the Arts in the Vatican Museums. It's great to see everybody here tonight. I hope people have been able to get around and see folks that they have not seen in a while. Part of these events is just a chance to reconnect. The thank yous for making this event happen would have to go far and wide, probably including most of the people who are here. So knowing that there is gratitude to all, I want to especially mention Maggie, Henry, Celine, Barb Collins and her team, and of course, our board and our associate board members for helping to make this happen. But of course, the most fundamental thank you goes to the Cardinal, Bishop Kane, and Father Sneeg for making available this premier space, the courtyard of the Quigley Pastoral Center. I suspect more than a few of us are here tonight because we have often passed those gates and peeked in, and now we have the real thing. We gather this evening because we're patrons, friends of patrons, and thinking about becoming patrons or thinking about a particular restoration project. Of course, the identity and mission of the patrons is fairly simple: to raise funds to restore artwork in the Vatican Museums, but implemented in a very significant and deep way. We have enlarged copies of some of the works we, the Illinois patrons, have restored, and I hope you've had a chance to look at them over here. They are also inside the program brochure, and on the back of the program brochure is a list of the restorations, a short history of what we've restored. When we gathered at the Art Institute last November, we focused on one of our restorations that's here tonight, the Madonna and Child with St. Mary Magdalene. This painting was restored in honor of Cardinal George and was available to view at the Art Institute for 3 months and present at his 50th anniversary celebration. But tonight we want to take a brief moment to really get deeper into the mission of the patrons. In order to do that, I sent out an email to people who are on one of our patrons' trips, and I asked them to reflect on the trip, especially their experience in the restoration labs. I've cut and pasted out several of the replies, and I want to read you this collage. Then my husband, Jack, will reflect further on this experience of restoration in the Vatican Museums. Finally, Cardinal George, the chairperson of the patrons, will talk about the importance of the patrons and our work. Here are the experiences of some of the patrons in their own words. Visiting the museums and ancient cities with noted art historian Liz Lev is a bonus as she takes you back to the historical context and emotion of the era with a great sense of passion of art and history. The ultimate experience traveling as a patron in Rome is probably touring and dining in the Vatican during closed hours. Another patron. The experience of spending considerable off-time hours in the Sistine Chapel was awesome. However, the visit to the restoration labs was a particular highlight, a kind of inside look at the creation of art. The contrast between the colorful, well-delineated, restored pieces are those still in the restoration process were stark and just amazing. What stands out most in the labs, though, was the enthusiasm of the professional restorers. They were obviously proud of their artistry and eager to point out details easily missed by us non-professionals. Their focus was not only on their finished and near-finished pieces, though. They were equally eager to show us several pieces that they had not yet begun to work on. They are certainly grateful for their assistance of the patrons in their work. Another patron. I truly enjoyed my trip to Rome and Florence. I had been to both in the past, but nothing like this trip. The tours were so special. The people gave us so much to see and hear. It was a great week. The Illinois Council gave us a remarkable tour of their restoration work, being done by the Vatican Labs. It is something you can't do on your own. It makes the visits so much more meaningful. And finally, in September in 2010, my husband and I took our 4 children and spouses on a patron's trip to Rome. It could possibly have been the most meaningful faith experience for our entire family. We were most impressed by our access to the laboratories where we could watch expert artists restoring priceless masterpieces with painstaking precision. One woman was working on an 8-foot painting of the Madonna by Raphael, while we watched just feet away. Another artist was creating a mosaic tile piece using a pair of tweezers to meticulously place each and every tile. I hope these brief comments can provide you with a glimpse of the patron's work. Now my husband Jack will continue to reflect on the work of restoration and the mission of the patrons.
In June of 2012, Ann said, "Why don't you come to the patron's trip?" She said Jack Wall will be there, Father Jack Wall, who's the chaplain of the patrons, and I said, "I'm in." And so I found myself a couple weeks later on the rooftop of the Hotel Minerva in the historic district, sipping wine with all the other patrons and getting ready for the trip. And as we do that, they went around, they were talking about why we're there and what we were looking for. And when it came to me, I simply said, "Ann brung me." I was accused of being arm candy. The morning we went to the patrons, to the Vatican Museums, we show up around 8 o'clock. There's already a line, a block long, 10 abreast, of every person from every place in the world. And as a patron, you sidle up in front, and you get to go in a side door and receive the resentful gaze of all these people. And once you get inside, you go around from gallery to gallery with a docent from the patron's office in Rome, and they tell you the technical material about a painting, its cultural significance, and they give you some real good gossip too. Why this guy over here doesn't have an ear in this painting, so you get the whole picture. And then we went into the labs. Now, I don't know what I expected in the labs. I thought maybe we'd just walk right through. But as soon as we went into a lab, and there all of a sudden 15, 20 people in white coats appear, and they gather around you, and then someone comes who can either speak English or someone who can translate the Italian into English, and they take what they're working on, or one of the pieces they're working on, and they tell you everything that's going on. And as you looked around at these people, as then you quickly got your picture taken with them, as you looked around, you realized something, or I realized something, that they weren't looking at benefactors. They were looking at partners. And they were very congenial. There were no cell phones out. There was no looks on their face like they'd rather be someplace else. And this went on from lab to lab. And one time I had sort of a little sidebar. I was overlooking at something which I didn't know what it was. It was about 5 foot high. It turned out to be a statue. It was wrapped in cellophane and tied very tightly at the top. And I couldn't see exactly what it was. And suddenly standing next to me, there was a man in a white coat. He said, "10th century statue of Bishop." I said, "Why is he in a bag?" "Kill bugs. Can't restore wood and paint till bugs dead." I said, "How long does he have to be in the bag?" He said, 9 months. I said, 9 months? This is very patient work. And he looked at me and he smiled, and then he was looking for a word. And his hands were going, and he was looking for a word, and he finally got it. And the word was painstaking. And then he smiled. That night, where? On the rooftop of the Minerva, with what? A glass of wine. We reflect on the experience of what's going on, and I find out that there are 14 of museums, and that it isn't just Christian, it's very, very wide. And I find out that the Illinois chapter, as you'll see on the back of the brochure that we have here, has restored wonderful paintings from the Christian communities of the past, but also has restored things from the 6 panels from the Hindu world, and has done a statue of a figurine of a Buddhist goddess Gwain, and has done kakimonos from Japan. And all of a sudden you realize these museums and this restoration is sort of the home of the human. And this was June of 2012, and this was the beginning of the 50th anniversary of the Second Vatican Council. And one of the quotes that is most quoted from the Second Vatican Council is the opening paragraph of the Pastoral Constitution of the Church in the Modern World, where it simply says, "The joys and hopes, the griefs and anxieties of people today are the joys and hopes, the griefs and anxieties of the followers of Christ. There is nothing human that does not find an echo in this community of faith. And that is why this community of persons is bonded to the history of humankind by the deepest and most powerful connections." And I thought to myself, that really describes these museums. This really describes what the Vatican is about. It's what they called the ministry ad extra into the world, the way the church gives itself into the world as a service for the best the world can be. We oftentimes talk about education as a ministry ad extra that does that, a ministry outside itself, and healthcare and Catholic charities and Catholic relief services. But here, I was wondering, could there be a restoration of art that would be a ministry ad extra to the world, that it would save the best the world of the past had to offer and raise it up and restore it to defy time and to defy loss, and to allow us entry through these artifacts into those past worlds and make our world deeper and more compassionate because of it? Is that what this restoration game is really all about? Are we really holding on to the hand of the past and holding on to the hand of the future? And we cannot let go of the hand of the past and just reach for our own hands and the hands of the future. And was this down deep, the smile on that restorer's face when his hands were going and he was saying, painstaking, but there wasn't any drudgery in that word. That word was just about something that he loved to do. Whenever the church does something, it always comes out of deep faith convictions and values. And the deep faith convictions and values that generate the restoration of art is that the divine source has loved every generation of people who have ever been. And in their response, they have created many beautiful things. And to find that beauty and restore that beauty and hold it up and allow us to enter into that beauty and grow by taking what we find within that beauty back into our own lives, that's not a bad thing to do. And that's what restoration is about. I remember in Cat's Cradle, the novel, there was a section called How God Made the World, and it was a division between what he called charis and granfalloons. Granfalloons were groups of people who thought they were important, but charis were folks who were doing things because they seemed to be right in a deep and powerful way. And they were connected by bonds that oftentimes were not clear. And tonight we are in a courtyard in Chicago, but the patrons are in most of the countries of the world. And they are sort of, I get to think of them a little bit as a charis, a group of people who are serving a deep, powerful, divine purpose in life to keep the glory and beauty of the past present to us today. And so here's the pitch. Are you okay? You ready for the pitch? Here's the pitch. If you're not a patron, think about it. Why not? This is a charis. This is a wonderful, wonderful work. Okay? If you are a patron, think about getting more and more involved with these restoration ideas. And if you are a patron, go to Rome and see it firsthand, because by now the bishop is out of the bag and he wants to talk to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jack. I'd like now to introduce our chairperson. I think all of you know who he is. Cardinal George.
Thank you very much. Let me thank in a special way all those that were involved in the restoration of the Madonna and Child with St. Mary Magdalene that came to Chicago and to our Art Institute as part of the celebration of my 50th anniversary as a priest. I'm very touched by that gesture, and I think everybody was very impressed by the beauty of the painting that was restored with your help. So I want to say in a particular way I thank the patrons for their kindness and the way in which they associated their own work, your work, with the moment in my own life that was very significant for me. I thank you. Jack just talked about these beautiful artworks as the patrimony of the human race. And that is very clear when you take a look at 5 of the restoration projects that the Illinois chapter has sponsored. The ones that come from the Missionary Ethnological Department, the 5 of them, were in some moment, probably around 1933, brought to the Vatican by missionaries, some of them by my own religious missionary institute, because in 1933, Pope Pius XI, who was a very mission-minded pope, wanted to celebrate the 1900th anniversary of our redemption from AD 33 to AD 1933. And in order to do that, he wanted to collect works from all the countries to the ends of the earth where the gospel had been preached. And so many mission groups were involved in creating what is now the Missionary Ethnological Department of the Vatican Museums. And I'm not sure as I go through which came from which institute, but I'm sure that most of those that would come from the northern part of the hemisphere would probably have been brought by missionaries from my own religious order. So it's not just that the works represent the patrimony of the human race, but so many human beings have been involved. Those who made these artworks, whether they were Christian or not, those who assemble them in these marvelous museums, the Vatican Museums, those who care for them with your help to restore them and to make them available so people who look at them can be brought into the great depth and the breadth of human experience, and can help us to understand who we are as human beings, and not just as citizens of a particular state or anything else that is limiting. The scope is as wide as the scope of creation itself. The Vatican Museums are under the governance structure of the Vatican City State, the civil arm of the Holy See. And as you know from the papers, there's been a very thorough reform of the structures in Vatican finances. The Vatican is a very old institution, not as the Vatican City State that just comes from 1929, but as the seat of the successor of Peter, it goes back 2,000 years. And so things grow up, whether you're talking about the court system or you're talking about the financial system. And over the centuries, very many structures to take care of finances from this part and finances from that part grew up and operated in silos. And that's not a very good way to run a unified operation, particularly in these days when accountability is so important. There was no way you could get a unified financial statement to indicate what was the state of Vatican finances. And in 1 year, Pope Francis has been able to put the new structures in place. And I was very impressed. I knew the situation somewhat because I was part of an oversight group of 15 cardinals from around the world who have been making recommendations for years as we got reports and couldn't make sense of all of it. And suddenly, in the space of a year, Pope Francis has had the courage to reform the structures. Now we'll see if they work. But I say that because it should be a comfort to you and reassuring that money donated by this group is going for the purposes and will go for the purposes for which you donated, and it will be transparent. They'll know exactly in the reports what went where, and that's, of course, part of the reform of the financial instruments that are now more and more international in scope themselves. So the money that is raised through the patrons here is now much more clearly accounted for in the financial statements of the Holy See. That's important, so people know that their desires as donors are being respected. So I want to thank all of you again, especially Anne and the members of the board and those who have made this get-together tonight possible. It's a great joy to be able to use this courtyard, which itself is inspired by 13th century France, but built here by Cardinal Archbishop Mundelein at that time, and preserving, therefore, a sense of the way the faith influenced architecture in Western Europe and still find a home in a very new part of the world that wasn't even thought of when the models for these buildings were first created. That is the way in which we understand that the faith is handed on from generation to generation and is expressed in new ways and in old ways all around the world. I think that's probably what most stayed with me, the lessons, the personal lessons that helped form my own sense of who I am as a Catholic and as a priest and a bishop. For the time that I was the Vicar General of my missionary order, I visited a lot of countries, very poor countries for the most part, and even in wealthy countries with poor people. And I lived always, never in hotels, but with the people who were working with those people. So I got to hear a lot of stories about the faith and about the church and about how it influences people's lives. Great art is one such influence. But what I came away from was two deeply rooted convictions. One is that the faith truly is Catholic, even though it takes forms that we wouldn't recognize at first until you ask what's behind that and what's the reason for this. But it is truly Catholic, but it takes many different forms, including many different artistic forms. And then secondly, that everywhere in the world, except sometimes in our own country, unfortunately, the church is a sign of hope and of freedom for people. Wherever I was, especially in very poor countries, no matter what else was going wrong, people were sure that in their parishes or with their priests and with the sisters, they would find security and hope and an oasis of peace in situations that were conflict-ridden. So you're part of that in contributing to this. You're part of it through your prayers, through the celebration of the Eucharist particularly. But know that that is what is the reason for the museums, to create through art these oases of peace and of hope for people in personal difficulties or in social difficulties, whatever. It's important that we be able to find those places and live in them as people of faith. So I thank you for being part of that work, and I thank you for being here tonight. God bless you.